Despite doing fairly well at the box office, Flubber was heavily criticised for being unimaginative, uninspired, and a totally baffling waste of talented performers. However, leaving the story aside for a second, Flubber did make us empathise with a flying yellow robot, laugh at some green goo that was 100% CGI, and believe that Robin Williams really held it in his hand. And the fact that that goes completely unnoticed is what is truly baffling, and well worth admiring. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the parts of this movie that were truly awesome. Some of the people who were responsible for making us believe that Flubber was real was the talented team at Industrial Light and Magic. The creation of Flubber began with look development. ILM artists went to grocery stores and bought hair gels and shampoos to give them references for Flubber's goo-like texture. Next, they had to think of how they might animate Flubber. Initially, they thought about using the same software they had used for the T-1000 in Terminator 2, or for the water tentacle in The Abyss, but that software wasn't adaptable enough for the flexibility of Flubber, so they decided to use a soft image 3D modeling tool called Metaclay. Flubber was also more flexible than more traditional CG characters, and so rigging had to be completely rethought. Typical methods of skinning and bone structure were replaced with spline-spine deformation rigs with control points for up vectors, stretch, and bend. They also had to make various physical models from hard plastic to show how Flubber displayed different emotions, and to give them an idea of how Flubber would refract and reflect light in the real world. In fact, the lighting reflections and refractions on this translucent green object were so complicated that for hero shots like this one, they used mental ray, a render that is used for ray tracing to give physically accurate refractions. Flubber was one of the first films to do this, even though they did do it sparingly because it was so computationally intensive. ILM was pushing the limits of what was possible at the time, ray tracing in 1997. The first film to be rendered entirely using ray tracing based rendering was Monster House in 2006, nearly a decade after. ILM further pushed the limits with this 5-second shot of Robin stretching Flubber over his face. It was so complicated to animate the impressions of Robin's face on Flubber to see his face refracted through Flubber and to light and render that those 5 seconds alone added 3 months to ILM's workload. Another hugely complicated scene that didn't receive the merit it was due was the Mambo dance sequence. This sequence required a huge amount of planning, storyboarding, and animation. They started by building an oversized set 3 times the size of the original to allow them to move the camera more freely and dynamically. Then they built an exact digital copy of the set, and that virtual set was used for accurate reflections and refractions, and to plan out camera moves. These camera moves were then ported to the motion control camera that shot the background plates on the oversized stage. In this scene, Flubber was also rendered using mental ray to ensure it correctly reflected and refracted the environment around it. But it wasn't just ILM that went over and above for Flubber. Real working machines like this breakfast maker were invented and engineered. Working robots were also fabricated, like Weber, which was actually controlled by 4 operators, one to drive it, one operating the tilt and head rotation, and then one to operate each arm. A full-size 1963 Thunderbird had to be set up on a motion rig for the flying scenes, and for close-up shots a car seat and steering wheel were set up on various gimbals. A massive 1/16 miniature for the city had to be built, and for the basketball scene with all the jumping and flying around, they needed multiple flying rigs. In order to accommodate multiple flying rigs operating at once without fouling each other, they actually had to build an entire 2,500-seat basketball stadium in an old aircraft hangar. And to populate it, they didn't just use real people. If you look closely, the people here and here are actually cardboard cutouts. But perhaps one of the main reasons we believe that Flubber really existed was thanks to the talent of Robin Williams. Nowadays, actors would have some sort of reference to work with on set, be it a person, some sort of puppet or prop, a simple plushie or stuffy toy, or Mr. Green here holding props or acting as the character. This on-set reference makes the actors' integrations and eye lines more realistic and therefore the CG characters more believable. However, Robin Williams neither had nor needed any of these things. He was a natural mime with a vivid imagination, and not only could he believe that what he was holding in his hand was 100% real, but he could force others to do so too.